our agenda this afternoon. I'm going to ask Stefan if he would just say a few words with regard to the virtual meeting.
Absolutely. Welcome to a virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members of the commission, if you're able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you're able, please activate your video when you're speaking. Please use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. During any roll call vote, all panelists will be unmuted briefly. Staff, please use the raise hand feature when you're asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on commission members in the order in which hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair Goodhart, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, first order of business is the approval of last time's minutes. See a motion for that. Okay, Tom. Seconded by Russell. Okay. Seeing no other hands raised, by unanimous consent, minutes are approved. Public comment, I did not see any registrants for general public comment. So we can move on to disclosures and recusals. Are there any disclosures or recusals to be noted? Janine, hold on a second. Let me just, okay, you're unmuted. Good.
Yep. Commissioner Assad, he's going to be 30 minutes late, but he wanted to make sure that you were aware he needed to recuse himself for item number 7.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, then you still have the floor. Janine, why don't you give us an agenda overview?
Okay, one moment, please. So the first thing I'm going to do is share a little bit of information of who to contact for questions. If you have any questions about this evening's meeting or comments that you wanted to add to public Legistar item, you can email urbandesigncomments@cityofmadison.com. Please note that any public comments received after 3 p.m. the day of the meeting may not be added to the public record until after the meeting. So with that, I will jump into today's agenda for Wednesday, March 10th. Okay, item number 2 under special item of business. This is an amendment to the Madison General Ordinances to accommodate larger setbacks for street trees. Matt Tucker, our city zoning administrator, will be providing a presentation on this. City Council referred this item to the Urban Design Commission, and if the commission wishes to support this, they would make a motion to approve this. Under public hearing items, item number 3 is 7104 Watts Road. This is a comprehensive design review. They're requesting initial final approval. There's a zoning staff report in your packet, and the applicant did accept the conditions that zoning staff had requested, and this could be recommended for consent. Following that is 1101 East Washington Avenue. This is a public building in Urban Design District number 8. Initial final approval is requested. There's a staff report in your packet. Again, this is an alteration to a public building. Item number 5 is a report of the facade grant team for 1254 East Washington Avenue, Urban Design District number 8. This particular item, there's a staff report. There is also a report from the facade grant team recommending this one to the commission for approval. And when this item comes up, I'll give a couple of introductions. The property owner is also available to answer questions for that. Item number 6 is 9301 Crosswinds Lane. This is under new business. This is an amended GDP SIP. And there was a staff report in your packet. Note that the original GDP was approved back in 2000. Plan Commission will hear this on March 22nd and Common Council on March 30th. Item number 7 is 1858 East Washington Avenue in 1890. This is a planned multi-use project located in Urban Design District number 8. This is an informational presentation. There's a staff report in your packet, and staff will give a quick introduction on some of the setback issues on this item when this comes up. And lastly, item number 8, 330 through 342 East Lakeside Street. This is a alteration to a public building. And this item is being referred or requested to be referred to the March 31st meeting to align with the Plan Commission dates. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's see. Why don't we start then with the one that Janine just mentioned and see if we can get a motion to refer item number 8 as requested. Okay, Lois, seconded by Shane. Okay. Seeing no other hands raised by unanimous consent, item number 8 is referred. There's also a staff recommendation for a consent agenda item approval on number 3. Is there a motion for that? Is that motion, Lois? Seconded by Jessica. Okay, any objections? Seeing none, then item number 3 is hereby approved on the consent agenda. Okay, and then that brings us back to number 2, which will include a presentation by Matt Tucker. I think I just unmuted you, Matt.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Okay, let me see if I can do this. I'm going to try, Stefan, if I can, I'm going to try and present the PowerPoint.
Yep, you should be able to.
So, thank you. Do we have it?
Nope. So you went to share screen at the bottom. Did you have a window pop up where you had to select a screen or an application? There we go. Okay, looks like that's your whole screen. Yeah, there you go.
Second. Is that working now?
Yep. Yeah, it's working now. So
Okay.
we are seeing presenter mode right now.
I need to see the other one. Sorry about this, folks. It's my first time doing this one. Just a second, I'm going to share the other screen.
Matt, if you go back down to share screen at the bottom of Zoom, it should bring up another window that allows you to specifically select the PowerPoint application.
Okay. Hold on, let me get it open.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm not getting this. Anytime I go into it, I can't get back to the share screen again. So. that one?
We're still seeing the PowerPoint presentation. Let's see here.
Hold on. That one?
Perfect. There it is.
Sorry about that. The first time for everybody, I guess. Okay. All right. So tonight I want to talk to you about this ordinance which has been introduced and referred to the Urban Design Commission for their review and recommendation. This ordinance is going to establish a setback requirement in the places where a zero setback currently exists for a number of zoning districts across the city. So getting started here, we start with the city's comprehensive plan, which was adopted in 2018, following a 2-year community engagement process. You all know all about that, I'm sure. The green and resilient section is one of the sections, one of the 6 elements that was in the comprehensive plan. Here are the comprehensive plan recommendations that most closely relate to the ordinance recommendation we're talking about today. Basically, recommendations about trying to help the tree canopy thrive and grow and be diverse. The city created an urban forestry task force in the recent past. This group was comprised of residents, alders, and staff from various agencies. This group created a report that had several recommendations, which were accepted in early 2020, and the task force was dissolved. Under the zoning and site plan review section, we find recommendation number 6, which relates to the proposed ordinance. And what that is once again, creating policies that encourage street and not prevent street trees, the provision of street trees. So the rationale, this is some of the rationale that was put forth and grounded within that urban forestry task report. The idea here, of course, is minimize our resources spent on pruning, avoiding property damage, and regulating tree replacement. So we tried to find an opportunity for change in the zoning code. We looked at the setbacks. This could provide a meaningful improvement to the opportunities for street trees in the more dense and redeveloping areas, specifically focused on providing more adequate space for tree canopy. We can do things that are in the ground to create a better environment for trees to grow, but ultimately the ability for the canopy to spread to any reasonable size is directly related to the conflict of having buildings potentially placed at zero setback. So we're kind of having competing interests here, and the idea is to take into account the needs and impacts on the redevelopment opportunities of areas that we find in the city, and also try and find an opportunity for greater tree canopy. So this slide shows an example of a nice mature honey locust tree in a pretty urban setting. The buildings are about, maybe 10 or so or less feet setback. They're lower, so there's plenty of opportunity for the canopy to grow. It is fairly pruned up, but this is a good example of what we could see and we would like to see. A lot of these slides were provided to us by the city forester that we worked with on this project. Here's a similar example of an urban area. This is on King Street. And you can see how the pruning needs to occur to keep the trees off of the buildings. And these, of course, are cases where the buildings are built at zero setback, or close to the property. So this is even a case here. This is where a small ginkgo tree is possible to survive. This is adjacent to a 1-story building. If this site was to develop, which we anticipate it probably will, to a 3 or 4-story building, even a small tree like this could be challenged. And so this is a site that would require, with the ordinance, a 5-foot building setback because of the shallowness of this curb to property line condition. So here's what the ordinance, paraphrasing the ordinance, here's what it's going to require. In districts where there's zero setback, it's going to utilize an if-then methodology. So if the distance between the curb and the property line is less than 15 feet, then buildings shall be set back 5 feet. Otherwise, if they're more than 15, it can continue with the zero setback. I'm going to show you a few examples. This first example here is a case where the curb to the property line is less than 15 feet. And in this case, the building would need to be set back a distance at least 5 feet. In this slide on the left, you envision that gray thing as a new building. And this is a case where you have a curb to property line where it is less than 15 feet, and so the building would need to be set back 5 feet from the property. And in this slide, doing the math on this, you do have 15 feet between the curb and the property line, and this would allow the building to potentially be placed right at a zero setback. Now we're probably going to look at just a few sites here, just to give you an idea how this would work. This is a vacant site, this potential future redevelopment site. The distance between the curb and the property line is less than 15 feet. So if the ordinance was in place, the building would need to be set back 5 feet. We talked to the city forester, as I mentioned earlier, and she provided us a list of 4 trees that are common that they can put in these existing narrow terrace situations where you have less than 15 feet between the curb and the property line. This is basically it for the diversity of trees that would be permissible according to her responsibility. And even these trees need to be pruned in many cases to avoid the buildings. So with the slight increase in the space between the tree and the building face, a few new species can be added to the city forester's palette of acceptable trees to utilize in the tight spaces, helping to increase the tree species diversity. These are some more that we can use. Here are some examples of those trees. This is an example that we're looking at on Monroe Street, the north side of Monroe Street. This is a site that would require a 5-foot building setback if it was just because of the way the curb faced to the property line location. And this American Century would be an acceptable tree with that greater setback. This Bloodgood London Lane tree is actually located in City Park, but we just wanted to show you an example of the tree with the canopy that would be also acceptable if we had the 15-foot to work with. So I'm going to show you now the zoning district areas where the zero setback exists. This map is a citywide map, and the brown that you see are all the areas where there's no front yard setback. The lighter colors as you head towards the bottom of the legend are where you start to get some setback. This is a good slide to look at because practically the industrial areas, some of the higher commercial intensity areas are probably not going to get a building in a setback. There just happens to be a zero setback. Some of those areas are also developed along streets that have wider terraces and whatnot. But, just an example of citywide where we look at and see the districts that are zero front setback or zero setback. And the gray are the planned developments. Developments have site-specific setbacks. They're all over the place. I'm going to show you some examples. We're just going to drive around the city and take a look at a few examples of developments, both existing and some recent ones that have been approved. This property is on the intersection of Williamson and Patterson. It's a 3-story building. It has a restaurant on the first floor and some apartments above. And in this case, both the street frontages from curb to property line are less than 15 feet. What would need to happen here, the Patterson Street side, which is on the left side of the green box, that would be okay. There's one clause that we have built in the ordinance where a property owner can grant us a no-build easement to get the 15 feet. If they had just under the 15 feet, they could grant a no-build easement to get to the 15 feet and thus not have to set the building back 5 feet. The Patterson frontage clause they could kick in that clause. They would have a 15-foot space between building and curb, and they would be good to go. On the Williamson Street side, it is that frontage is less than 15, and if this building were proposed, it would still need that no build easement along the Williamson Street side, and they would need to move the building about a foot to the upper left, 15 foot. This is the Pecos McBride residential commercial redevelopment. This, I think, was probably about 2008, 2009 on Hancock, Johnson, and Hamilton Street. We wanted to show you this because this is an example of varying frontages. That parking lane that it has a bump out at the corner has a less than 15-foot setback between the curb and the property line. So in this case, the building would have needed a 5-foot setback to get to the 15 feet, or they might be able to take advantage of that easement to give us a few feet to get the 15 feet. Up on Hancock Street, which is the street to the top of the picture, let's see, it's about 13 feet from building, from curb to property line, and so that would need a slight shift or no build easement. I think that building is built right to the property line, so it'd have to shift just a little bit. Then over on Hamilton, which I really don't have a shot of for you, but it's the notch out in the upper left corner. It's kind of a jagged, zigzag approach there. And those pointy corners of the building are right about 13 feet. So they would need a 2-foot no build easement there also, because the frontage between the curb face to the property line on that side is also less than 15 feet. This is a site at the corner of Atwood and Maple on the east side, and Fair Oaks is to the south. We talk about this site a lot, about building close to the street and how sort of the condition between buildings and streets. This is one where Atwood is about 7 feet from curb to the property line. So this one would require a 5-foot setback, but you wouldn't get a 15-foot space, you would get 12. And that would be compliant. May not be appropriate in this case to put in one of those more spreading tree types. Along Maple, which is the road to the north or to the top, it's about 11 feet between curb and property line. And so they could do the 5-foot setback, or they could do a 4-foot easement if they wanted to get to the 15 feet and then move the building just 4 feet. This is the Government North parking ramp. This is on the corner of East Mifflin, North Webster, and North Butler Street. The street down on the left side is Webster. And in this case, the location between the curb and the property line is about 13 feet on Webster. If you see a little landscape island, that kind of bisects where the actual setback sits. So it's hard to tell. The sidewalk isn't directly aligned with where the property line is found. This building on Webster is actually set back about 20 feet from the property line. So it's really about 33, I think, or so feet back from curb face. So as you can see in this photo, it's the Google trees, whatever, but there's substantial larger canopy trees plantable here because it has a big enough setback to for diverse trees. Similarly, over on Butler, which is to the top of the page, that also has a greater setback. The property line to curb face is 18 feet, and then the setback from the property line to the building is 13 feet. So if you've been over there, you'll see there's a very handsome canopy of trees over on that side of the street. The more complicated one is the main street we see here in that frontage, which is East Mifflin. There's about a 10.5-foot setback between the curb face and the property line, and so the building is about right on the property line or close to it. So in that scenario, the building would have to provide a 5-foot setback. or 4.5 foot in the buildings can be placed at 4.5 to get 15 feet. This is a site that was recently approved for redevelopment on the intersection of Cottage Grove and Monona Drive. And in this site, Monona Drive is to the left and Cottage Grove is to the top of the page. The terrace on Cottage Grove is 15 feet. So it would be okay to place that building at 0 setback. But we wanted to show this because many projects are already providing setback. It's kind of uncommon for people to place buildings actually right at the lot line. Often building footings need to be placed at the bottom of walls and those can't project into the right of way. So you'll get a little bit of a setback anyways. The building they're proposing for this location is set back about 12 feet from the property line. So, you're about 27 feet back, I guess, from curb face. So there'll be plenty of opportunity to place street trees here. Along the Monona Drive frontage, that's a pretty narrow terrace and sidewalk area. It's about 10 feet. And that building is set back 6 feet from the property line. So you're going to be at about 16. So that would be a compliant situation. The ordinance would not require anything for this redevelopment. It wouldn't apply. It would apply, but it wouldn't make any changes to the project. I want to show some examples where the ordinance doesn't apply, some real obvious ones. This is the West Washington Avenue corridor, really wide right away. 4-lane street in there, as you know, huge terraces. We don't have to worry about 15 feet between the curb and property line here. This is the square, East Washington and Pinckney, the ULI site, I guess, that you've recently seen is here. Once again, large terraces, curb to property line. Not going to have to worry about it at all here. Wanted to focus in on the downtown areas because really the areas where we see this most often are the downtown and those traditional corridors where we're seeing infill type development. Williamson Street, Atwood, on the east side, Johnson Street, another one. On the west side, Regent Street. We might see Monroe Street, on South Park Street in the Urban Design District that you folks see plenty of projects in. We would definitely see the ordinance kicking in there. But as you can see, there's quite a bit of 0 setback in the greater downtown area. But with the ordinance, we also have an area that's exempt of this. So we went through and took a look at areas that would be where this kind of a setback would really negatively affect the redevelopment of these sites because of the shape of the lots or other factors. And so all the frontages that you see here in red are excluded from the minimum setback being provided. These stay at 0. This is an example over at Fairchild and Hamilton. Our offices were located here for a while. You folks might have come by and seen us. We were here when our space was being remodeled. The space between the curb and the building, it's pretty tight. And so if you took 5 feet off of these two frontages, you're really chiseling away the redevelopment opportunity in the site. Here's another one. This is another Flatiron location that we've been approached a number of times about potential redevelopments. And once again, the opposite corner where Madison's is with the turret on the left. For example, 0, we would probably anticipate a 0 here in the center also. It's exempted. And lastly, where is this going? It was at the Finance Committee on Monday, and it was approved there. We're here in front of the Urban Design tonight, on to the Economic Development Committee next week, Plan Commission on March 22nd, and Common Council on the 30th. And that is all I have. Any questions?
Well, thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Tucker? Tom. Holy smokes. Tom, hold on a second. There's a little helium intake on your end. I'm gonna have to mute you. I'm sorry. I don't know, Stefan, if you can help him out, but I'll let Russell go.
Tom, you sounded like Donald. It's a technology thing on your end. A question for Matt. Thank you for the presentation. On slide number 13 might be the best way to ask this, but I just was curious. You're showing a generic example of a property that would require the new 5-foot setback. And I'm just curious how common the condition is that there's much less distance between the curb and property line than that example. For instance, and you may have mentioned it, but if there's a property that doesn't have much of a terrace or a sidewalk at all existing, if that even occurs with no sidewalk, what would be the condition there if that even exists?
Well, there aren't. I'm not aware of any examples, but I'm sure there probably someone somewhere of no terrace and no sidewalk. That would be an extremely tight situation. And in a case like that, it would be there would be a 5-foot setback required.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Shane.
If I could add just one more piece. There's one thing that I didn't mention is, sometimes when we're also dealing with people that are developing or redeveloping property, they are moving the curb line. That has happened before, where they're actually putting it closer or back further from for a variety of reasons. Maybe the city wants them to do it too. So the idea is at the time that we're issuing the permit, it's the location of the curb relative to the property line. So we're anticipating that people may come through and actually move that curb line. Maybe they're doing traffic calming or something like that would result in this setback requirement not applying if it's close.
Go ahead, Shane.
Okay, thanks, Matt. I'm definitely in support of this, and it seems like you covered a lot of scenarios, so that's helpful to see all the different scenarios that you've thought about. I think my one question is, within that setback, are there any guidelines or restrictions? I think what we will probably have to consider on an individual basis is the urban design is what happens there, and I am afraid of having a 5-foot zone with dinky little 2-foot shrubs in front of large buildings. So I think that would probably be a case by case evaluation and scenario. But is that 5-foot setback useful for other things like sidewalk cafes, or are there any limitations to that space?
There are limitations to building things in that space, but using the space for sidewalk cafes, merchandise displays, other types of landscaped areas are entirely possible. As you know, it's going to be impractical to do private landscaping that is very meaningful within a 5-foot space. We're often faced with that, and particularly in these urban areas, there's a provision of the ordinance that allows us to waive the landscape frontage requirements that happen every time a project comes in, because you're not going to plant anything that's tree substantial in a 5-foot area. So often it's a landscape architect who's doing a landscape plan that's going through to figure out what the best condition should be at the interest of the property owner to create a space. Sidewalks, sidewalk cafes, seating, all those types of things are permissible. It's the construction that will be not permissible.
So how about anything like a raised planter or a seat wall or something that is a structure? Sure.
Well, if we deem those to be landscaping, they're fine, and we can allow them. There's a lot of features like that are not buildings that are occupied or they're not heated. They're not the types of things that are, I would say, are obstructions to that are part of the building. They're basically landscape conditions, and those are going to be just fine.
Okay, thanks.
Just to follow up on that, if we had a slightly sloping site and and the first floor was, say 3 feet above the sidewalk level, this ordinance would preclude the construction of an outdoor seating area that was a structure that was above the sidewalk then.
Like a veranda, like some sort of a 5 foot wide veranda.
Yeah, like if they wanted to open up their storefront and push out, but they were built up on a platform of 3 or 4 feet. Because it doesn't interfere with the canopy, of course.
Yeah, probably. I'd have to think about that because that's kind of like those types of features are allowed in setbacks. Generally speaking, like at-grade decks, verandas, patios, it's just like a patio. So I'd want to kind of look at that and just make sure we knew what we were talking about. But I'm thinking that would probably be just fine. Because those things could be anywhere according to the projections and setbacks already. So we're probably going to be fine on that. And the ones that I think aren't are the ones that are, structural floating with trellis roofs or things like that. Any of those types of features that they're not open to the sky would follow this.
Okay. Alder Abbas.
Am not. Thank you. I'm muted now. Thanks. Matt, one quick question. So I understand this is going to impact the new construction, new building. Would that ordinance also will impact the parking lot for the car dealership, like car dealership parking lot or other parking lots like that?
No, those existing places already, there's already mechanisms in place that require not a zero setback, that you end up with a landscape area between the edge of like a auto display area and the public street. It is a building setback requirement. I don't think I'd have to think about whether or not there may be some way that they could allow for something like that to go in. I know I could see it being a problem with like lights and things like that, like fixtures. But by and large, the idea is to prohibit above grade type construction that would interfere with the canopy.
Okay. Tom, I'm going to give you another chance here. No, it still sounds like a high frequency insect. Nope. Any other questions or comments? Jessica.
Yeah, I guess maybe this was spelled out already, but I'm thinking about what Russell was asking when there isn't any distance between the curb and the property line. I'm wondering where the 5 foot came from, because like you mentioned in one of the examples, you have a 7 feet between the curb and the property line, and you add 5, then you got 12 feet. Still not really enough room for a tree. Do you envision, well, first of all, like is it not allowable to say that just total it needs to be 20 feet or something to allow a tree? And then if somebody only has a setback of like 6 feet and adding another 5 feet is not going to help them have a tree, can they argue that they don't have to do the 5 foot setback anymore?
Let me take that last part first. They probably won't be able to argue that they don't have a setback. Even in a situation like that, if you think about that Fair Oaks example I gave you, we point that out as a very harsh urban environment. Like we almost looked at that as, it's a very nice development, and I think people who probably live there and operate their businesses like it a lot. But if you walk in front of it during the day, it's scary with how close cars come in such close proximity. So there's always been a consideration of trying to recognize that developments placed that close to the property, to the curb and the street are not the best environments. Organically, we don't see that really. It's very rare that we see a building that's placed in that kind of a situation. Regarding your first question about what do you have when you have that 7 foot wide space and you might have the 5, I mean, you're still going to get an opportunity potentially for one of those narrower species trees to be there. And I think the city wants to continue to have that option. They really want to, the goal is to really open up those opportunities, even in a narrow situation like that. So you're not getting diversity. You're staying in the same non-diverse 4 trees or whatever that we have. But at least you're going to have some potential space. And also the city of Forester is also, there's a lot of other things that are at work. We've been talking to her about the rules about placing trees and where they can be relative to intersections and stuff. So it's not guaranteed you're always going to have something that falls in there. Plus, there was maybe a decade or two where we thought it'd be a good idea to put the utilities in the terrace rather than on the streets. So we deemed a lot of terraces unplantable. And I think we've been undoing that with our streets where we put utilities in the streets so you can plant terraces. And part of the complete streets efforts and things like that have been looking at narrowing streets and creating detention areas and rain gardens and things like that. And there's a lot of moving parts that happen that relate to that little space between the curb face and the property line, and then what's just on the other side, where a zero setback building, by and large, creates a challenge. This is really focusing on street trees because we use that policy direction, but there'll be other impacts or positive results with the ordinance.
Okay, Janina, I see you had your hand raised there.
Yeah, 2 quick things. Tom, if you want to email your comments to Julie and I, we can read them for you, or your comments, your questions. We'll make sure we get those out to the group. And then secondly, there was somebody registered for public comment that we should probably, the name was Bill Connors.
Wishing to speak? Okay.
Correct.
Okay, Bill, you should be unmuted.
Very good. Thank you. I'm Bill Connors. I'm the Executive Director of Smart Growth Greater Madison. And I wanted very much our organization wanted very much for the Urban Design Commission to have a look at this ordinance. First of all, when Matt Tucker was listing off the people involved in the Urban Forestry Task Force, I don't remember him saying anything about property owners or developers being involved in that group. And I think that would have been, a better product possibly if there had been outreach and participation, from, the property owners who are going to be impacted by this proposal. Second of all, I'm wondering if Matt Tucker can bring up, there was a slide of South Fairchild and Hamilton. I don't know if he can bring that up while I'm talking, but in his presentation, he was showing one of the Flatiron blocks, but I wanted to be able to point out something on the other side of Hamilton there. But if you're talking about, recreating an entire block face, for example, if you're taking down that parking ramp and recreating that entire block face, it's quite easy to create a uniform facade depth, at 5 feet from the property line, and that looks very nice. But if you're talking about an existing commercial, neighborhood street where there's all the buildings are old and they're pulled up to near the sidewalk as near as they can be, and maybe two of the parcels in the middle of the block are combined into a new redevelopment, but the corner buildings still remain, you end up with this ordinance, you end up with a jagged facade along the street where you're at 0 and then you're in 5 and you're at 0 and in 5, and that for the pedestrian creates a kind of a disconcerting environment. It also creates for the property owners of those ones that are set back, a challenge to figure out how to program that space, what to do with that space from, a point of making it attractive for their customers. So those were things we thought it was important to consider for the Urban Design Commission to consider. I also want to pick up on something Matt Tucker said about, curbs move. Curbs can be moved. There is a movement afoot to narrow up streets as they're reconstructed and move those curbs in a bit. And so here we are. We have a situation where we need more space for trees. The city controls the right of way. The city can move those curbs and create more space for the trees, but the city's not doing that. Instead of the city is imposing, the cost, the burden of this completely on the property owners. And in some situations that may not be, that additional 5 feet may not make that much difference, but in some of these urban lots, they're not very deep. And you can literally create a situation where you take away that 5 feet, it make it very difficult, if not impossible, to redevelop. So in some of your most important, urban neighborhood commercial corridors, you may create an incentive not to invest. You may create an environment where people are not investing in those corridors, and that's not a good thing for the city. So I don't know if Matt can bring up that slide from his presentation of South Fairchild and Hamilton, but on the other side of the street, on that slide, on that image, you can see there's a mid-block building that's set back 5 feet, and it's just an empty, dead space. And with that, I'll yield to see if anybody has any questions for me.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Connors? Matt, I don't know if you have any, if you want to make any or offer any response to any of the comments or not.
Yeah.
Particularly maybe with regard to the process.
Hold on a second.
Okay.
So the Urban Forestry Task Force, I did go to those meetings a couple of times, and it was comprised of a variety of people. I'm not sure exactly who the composition was, and they talked about all things related to encouraging the more tree cover in our city. And so I don't know exactly if we had a group of developers or any interest of developers. There were property owners that were involved. They generally were. I'm not exactly sure who they were, and if they were developer, commercial property type people. I think I would disagree with Bill that we are rebuilding and redoing streets in ways where, with the complete streets, we're putting in cycle tracks and things like that, where you're moving the curb. That's happening quite a bit. It doesn't happen always. So the idea of a slight change to the curb to create a greater terrace area, say in a street that is 50, 60 years old, that it's designed in a way that was very motivated towards automobiles and not pedestrian friendly. But yeah, we're doing that with all the streets that we rebuilt. And so I think that is there's a whole different view of how streets are being reconstructed. And so the moving of a curb is possible. Is it going to happen all the time? I don't really necessarily know. We wanted to show you the examples of organically of projects that are already complying with this, because we think it's kind of already happening to a certain extent, and we're getting really close to where we need to be to get the forester to be cut loose to be able to put more diverse tree species in there. And that really is the push on this, I think.
Okay, thank you. Janine?
I wanted to share, Tom forwarded his question. He's looking for a better explanation on the easement exception. I think you had shared a graphic on it, if you could talk about that.
So what it is when we were talking about this, the goal was always to try and create a 15-foot space between curb and property line, assuming that property line was where the building could get placed at its closest point. So we have some situations where there might have been 14 or 13 feet, like I showed over at Patterson and Williamson Street. They were very, very close. And all we need for this diversity is the 15 feet. So rather than make that property provide a 5-foot setback, they have the alternative of granting a no-build easement for a small thin sliver. And in the case of, I think of the Patterson Street frontage, they would have devoted basically a 1 foot no build easement. And the building was already placed a couple of feet off of the property line anyways, and so they would need to do nothing with that. Over on the Williamson Street side, that one I believe was a little bit closer, and even with to get the 15 feet, it would be shifting the building a little bit and devoting that little piece of no build in there to get a 15-foot space between curb and where the building is going to sit, so you can have that potential for greater canopy. Does that answer your question, Tom?
Tom, I emailed you a couple troubleshooting options. Okay. Looks like.
Thank you, Cliff. Matt, very quick question about Bill comment about outreach. Could you please talk a little bit about did staff reach out to property owner or the sponsors of the ordinance? Did some sort of outreach? Do you mind talking a little bit about that? Thanks.
Sure. So we have been working on this, I'd say, probably for the last 4 or 5 months with the sponsors. This came up last February with the Plan Commission's Green and Resilient work session. We brought up a number of things, including the Urban Forestry Task Force report that recommended this type of that offered policy recommendations for this type of thing. And then the Alder sponsors have interest in this. I think the mayor is also listed as a sponsor in seeing that this got pushed forward. So I know we've talked to Bill a number of times. I think Heather and myself and a few of the sponsors have talked directly with Bill. And I want to say we probably also talked with the Downtown Madison Inc. We reached out to them too. I can't remember exactly who, but we prior to this ordinance being even in draft form, we have been having conversations about looking at establishing a setback, 0 setbacks to support diverse tree street planting. Obviously, the way these go, you ultimately need to draft them up and release them and refer them. And there's a lot of outreach that occurs or public review that occurs as part of that. But this isn't the first time this idea has been floated.
Cliff, you're muted.
Thank you. As you may recall, at the beginning of the meeting, Janine asked UDC to make a motion. The motion would be to approve. The staff is requesting a motion for approval as it moves up the ladder of different committee approvals. Shane?
Yeah, I think the point Bill made about, so I guess first of all, I think the objective to me is clearly positive and beneficial. I think Bill did make a good point about, considering where we're creating this space for trees and whether it's the city in the right of way that's creating it or whether the burden is falling on the property owner. And I think Matt kind of touched on this, that would be concerning if we're talking about more suburban areas where we have wide right of ways with excessive drive lanes, excessive pavement. But overwhelmingly, what I'm seeing are that the areas that this is really targeted for are areas where there's not really street circulation and right of way to give. You can't really narrow the drive lanes. You can't really remove the drive lanes. Your only option would be maybe to remove parking, which is kind of a loaded topic. So I think it's very applicable and beneficial to the areas that are being proposed. And I would make a motion to recommend approval with possible additional consideration of some of the restrictions or what is allowed in that setback space. We had a pretty good discussion, I think, tonight about what that is and that how there may be some gray areas. So just maybe some additional clarification on what is allowed within that 5-foot setback.
Okay. Lois, is that a second?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay. Any discussion on that motion? Alder Rummel.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
First of all, I'm thinking this might be my last attendance at an Urban Design Commission meeting as Alder. And I did serve with some of you, and I really enjoyed working on this committee, and I learned so much, including about trees from the landscape architects. And never before had I thought about how trees will poke you in the eye if they're in the wrong spot, but now I see that all the time. But anyway, thank you for the motion to support. As you can see, I'm one of the sponsors and have full support of this effort. We are losing so many trees with emerald ash borer, and just, we don't give enough space for full-size canopy trees. And our forestry, has a mantra of the best tree for the best space, but if it's a very small space, we're not going to get those larger canopy trees. So this was an initiative to do kind of a flexible approach. It's not like a hard line. If then is not something we do very often as a requirement. And so I thought it was kind of innovative, actually. And I really like that idea that came out of this effort. And to the point that Mr. Connors made about the zero setbacks, having lived along a street and worked, in a neighborhood that has zero setbacks, I think it's this myth that somehow the zero setback is the urban form and it's so much better than any other kind of variation. Because I think people really prefer to have a little alcove. Yes, you have to program it and keep it and use it, but it could be any number of things. It could, including public space or a space for a tree to grow. And I really think, especially at corners, when you're trying to have vision triangles, having buildings just, assumed to be always at the corner, at the edge is something I think we should always look at carefully. So I don't really necessarily accept that is just an absolute good. But I do understand that, there are some variations on a street, and I actually think that makes streets more interesting myself. But that's my opinion. And again, I just want to appreciate all of your work. And when I was watching this slideshow, I did recall that some of the one on Willie and Patterson is in my district, and that building was designed by your own secretary. And so I always think about her when I see that building, and now she's your secretary. So shout out to Janine. Anyway, so thanks for everyone for all your work, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Alder Rummel. We certainly enjoyed working with you over the years as well. Any other discussion on the motion? Okay. Seeing no hands raised, no objections to the motion, then I would say by unanimous consent, the motion to approve is granted. Thank you, Matt, very much for your time. Okay, so let's see, that was 2, 3 was consent. That brings us to Madison Metro Transit Facility on East Washington, and presentation by John Evans.
So the team available to speak, Stacy Keller, as well as John Evans. And I'll pull up the screen shortly.
Yes, good evening. I'm John Evans. I'm with City Engineering. We're working with Madison Metro and our consultant, Eden Hunt, who's doing the architect and engineering work for this project at Madison Metro. Stacy Keller is with us this evening.
I'm here.
Oh, good. Hi, Stacy.
I don't have camera abilities, I don't believe, but I'm here.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you, Stacy, for being available tonight for this. And I'm going to just shut my flapper here and let Stacy take over. I just wanted to say one thing, just to give the commission sort of a broader context. Maybe I'm stealing Stacy's thunder here a little bit, but apologize, Stacy. But we're in the middle of a multi-phase renovation at this facility. It's on East Washington. We started, Stacy, what was it, going back?
4 years ago, I think.
4 years ago.
Master plan process, yes.
Right. So we've completed phase 1 and phase 2. I believe phase 1 was actually before the Urban Design Commission several years ago for an addition on the building. Phase 2 was largely inside the building, it was all work basically done inside the building. And now here we're before you tonight for the third phase of renovations at the building, and this is where we start to affect the exterior of the building, and which is sort of obviously the commission's purview and why we're here tonight. So just Stacy, if you want to take over now.
Yep, I will. Thanks. Do I have controls? Do you want to hit the next slide? This was just to kind of show overall of that main entry. So yes, this is the 1101 East Washington Avenue building. It's the Madison Metro's bus barn maintenance facility and driver dispatch zone. And it sits at the corner of Ingersoll and East Washington. Next. There's a diverse group of buildings that surround the property. It's attached in some ways to the 1245 building, which is also connected to the ShopBot building as you move down East Washington Avenue. Next. These are some of the existing building photos. We come along East Wash on the top side, down to the corner. If you go down, all along East Wash, some of the back stuff. This is a quick photo on the right. Bottom right is the phase 1 addition area that was affected. Next. And then more focused on this project, the corner on Ingersoll. We are working, I'll show you the floor plans, but working through a lot of these different elements of this corner, again, along Ingersoll, and then recessing back into the parking areas. Next. So yeah, if we take a look at the floor plans here, this is the along Ingersoll corner that is mostly affected. All the rest is very, very interior renovations. And as we were looking through phasing the building, we are trying to provide a new public entry as we reprogram some of these spaces, putting the break room and some of the more lively elements of the training room along Ingersoll to give them some more natural light into the facility. And then a lot of their maintenance and service areas are tucking up as you go into the corner. So this provides an opportunity for us to provide some new daylighting opportunities, windows, and a new main entry along Ingersoll. And so as part of this phase project, again, eventually we'll kind of march around the rest of the building, but we're really focused on this Ingersoll facade. And then as it tucks back up, these panels are adjusted to, their metal panels are part of the, have asbestos as part of it. So we are trying to do a holistic component and adds to the cost. If we can go to the next slide. Again, you can see what our proposal is for those new entry components, adding some blue metal panels into some different configurations. Next. The site plan is overall not really affected. We are just putting some very small minor additions underneath that existing awning, but really no effects other than providing that new entry on Ingersoll. Next. The lighting plans, again, not greatly changing. We are adding some sidewalk lighting along Ingersoll. but overall not really changing the site's lighting. Next, some perspectives from the East Wash corner. We are providing a small cant overhang to the building, but that projection does not stick out any farther than the landscape bunker that sits along Ingersoll currently. So we are still within the building property line. Again, just another view. Signage is still being worked out by Metro, but we just showed some potential locations that'll get worked through as we get down the road on the design. Next. Next.
That's the last slide.
Oh, okay. Well, then that's all.
All right. Thank you. Any questions for Stacy or John? I guess I have a question. If you could remind me through your presentation, are the buff-colored, mustard-colored metal panels all proposed existing to remain?
So from the corner of, sorry, Janine, where the blue panel starts on the left side, there is a seam there. So everything to the west of there is existing, and then everything to the east side is going to be replacement panel to match the existing component.
So east, all right, toward Williamson. Okay, that's all new. And it'll be new and just kind of try to match as closely the existing color then?
Right, because those are asbestos panels, they're not making them exactly anymore. And so we are just replacing similar panels, and we were able to find something pretty similar when we did the phase one addition on those existing panels. Pretty similar. That's why we're providing that blue break, just knowing that it's not going to be ever identical.
Okay, thank you. Russell?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. This slide is pretty good for my question. Along East Wash, there's a sloped element at the building, foundation, if you will, maybe, and you can see it in the bottom elevation at the bottom left of that elevation. There's a. Can you speak to what the purpose of that slope is, and if that's new, if that's part of this?
That's existing currently. We are cutting it to provide the entry component and fill that in. But it is we're assuming some sort of landscaping and infill component that they put in so that they did not have to maybe snow plow it or something at some point. But it's not necessarily the structural grade beam that actually sits up at that high level. I think they were also trying to slope up to that. There is a tall grade beam supporting the whole structure around the entire metal building that sits at the top of that. So I think they were trying to kind of screen that as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions or comments? They are requesting final approval today. Rafiq.
Are we ready for a motion?
Yes.
I'll make a motion for approval.
Thank you. Is there a second on the motion? Jessica? Is that a second? Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, I don't see any hands raised. So by unanimous consent, final approval is granted. Thank you very much. Janine, I think we may have lost Tom. So
apparently he's having trouble getting his device up and working. I told him to reboot, and he's not able to get it back running. So I sent him the phone number, and maybe he'll call in and join us that way.
I'm not sure if so he didn't vote on this one, but I'm not sure whether he dropped off before the motion was voted on for item number 2, but I'm sure we can track that information down. Okay, that brings us to item number 5, the facade grant project 1254 East Washington.
Phil Paramovich is available to answer questions. I'll give a quick overview of kind of the facade grant intent and what they're proposing, and then I can pull up the drawings of what is being proposed. So actually, I'll do that right now. Okay, bear with me. So the facade grant program, just a reminder, it is intended to assist property owners or tenants with improvements or restorations of the aesthetics and architectural appearance of a complete building facade. It is and mainly it's intended to help small private businesses by supporting projects that rehabilitate existing structures, create an attractive environment, encourage neighborhood character and architectural design, use quality materials, and incorporate good design concepts. So we're supporting the businesses, but also the areas in which they exist. So this particular applicant is requesting final approval for building exterior facade improvements to an existing masonry building that had been previously repaired from a vehicle impact. And this was years ago. And so some of this existing view here as well as here starts to show where that was patched. Now the proposed scope is limited to the first level facades on both East Washington and Baldwin Street. So it's here and here, and then some along this edge. Oftentimes these very small business owners may not be able to hire an architect. So we work with them to help them assemble a project. So the UDC would be approving body on the UDD 8 requests and advisory on the facade grant approval request. So with that, here's a sketch that Phil had provided to give some idea of the intent behind the design and putting some wood paneling to cover up some of those patched areas and then painting that a dark gray and then painting some other areas that had been patched on the facade on Baldwin. And then here's an example of the color, kind of a peppercorn, possibly a little bit darker. And then here are some inspiration photos that the owner had provided, some of the detailing that he was kind of thinking, with some solid panels and some raised panels wrapping the corner. So with that, so Phil is available to answer questions. And Phil, you're welcome to add anything you want to the presentation, and then the commissioners will ask you questions.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay. Any questions, comments from the commission? Russell and then Christian.
Just to be clear, we're being asked to approve or weigh in on the grant that this property should be receiving the grant. Is that right?
That is correct. There is some of those details are in the packet, whereas they're it's a matching grant up to $10,000 per facade. So this would, since it's on a corner, it could be up to $20,000.
And then just related to that question, were there other applicants for the grant?
There is a fund for every year, so there are often multiple applicants throughout the year, and actually there's a couple of them that'll be coming up in future meetings. So Tom Otto in community development and finance helps to shepherd the financial side of it along. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess ultimately I'm just trying to understand if there was another applicant that is not receiving the grant because this project is before us. So But it sounds like there's multiple awardees a year. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Christian?
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So to the applicant, Phil, I had a little trouble reading this photo overlay here. So just to clarify, we're basically covering the secondary off-color masonry part here with, other than the functioning door with the glass block on top of it, the rest of it is just like a false facade to give the appearance of an Irish tavern, but it's just really covering bad masonry. So it's basically for aesthetics. There's no functioning business at this time anyway that's going in on that first floor.
Right. Yes.
And the part that you have, the parameters of it here, are you trying to, cover up all of that secondary masonry? I mean, does to the left there, does it go all the way to the end of the building towards EVP?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I guess my other question is, anything is an improvement on this. Most people know, or maybe some don't know, this is the late great Smart Studios building. And it's never been a great looking building and stuff. So I think anything would be an improvement, and I'm not averse to doing even a false facade to kind of brighten up this corner here and stuff. Are you a do-it-yourself? Are you doing this? Or are you hiring contractors to do this?
I would be hiring this work done.
Okay. And my other question, I see on the Baldwin Street side, you're replacing those doors and a panel at the end. Again, it sounds like you're going to clean up the brickwork some. Any thoughts about those other blank first floor windows somehow being tied into the rest of this design?
I think it would be good to paint those the same color as the rest of it.
I do too. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you. Lois.
Thanks, Cliff. Oh, sorry, my dog just started barking. If you go to the original, unaltered photo of the corner of the building, I have a question about I think this is going to be a tricky thing to do with just plywood and keep it looking nice, because obviously, that paint cover is going to be very important to keeping it looking nice. So at this point, I'm wondering if it would be, rather than going all the way to the corner, I'm wondering if it would be more effective to end where that white lintel thing is, where that ends. So you don't have this weird kind of brick and side of the
I got you.
Facade kind of, I think you'd have to paint then maybe that part of the brick that is already painted, maybe that just gets painted again. So I think the material will be tricky, and I'm unsure how you are planning on capping it. You have above that decorative. Now I'm going to go back to your drawing here. Above the decorative corbels and that banding, you have another little piece of MDO painted. is there anything that's going to cap that? I mean, this is plywood, right? I mean, I just kind of worry about what this is going to look like in 5 years. And
well, I wouldn't be using just plain plywood. MDO is used for what do you call them? When you're driving by and you see giant billboards, it's used for outdoor signs. So it's made to hold up to the weather, and that is the material I would be using. I could also cap that with trim work. That would probably look nice as well.
Yeah. And then also I'm wondering about the base. Maybe there's, just a small detail to give the base a little, so it's not just coming down flat against the sidewalk, if that's possible. I don't know. You may be running into not wanting to cover the sidewalk too much. So
yeah, I was thinking about that. I got some advice in an email from somebody in this committee. That's something. Yeah, that's kind of how I was imagining doing it, like that. But I think it would be good to maybe use a material right at the bottom that could stand up to the weather and ice and
salt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the only other thing is, I mean, I know this is just a facade, and the kind of windows. I really wish they were going to be opened up, but I understand there's not a programming change inside. So that's my only other comment. But I think I'm glad that you're addressing this building.
Yeah, the windows are underneath the existing, what looks like windows is probably a foot of insulation and wall. So those were kept long ago because of it being a recording studio.
Yeah. Okay, that's all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Bus.
Thank you. Janine, quick question for you. So regarding facade grant, does that applicant decide how much he need, or what is the process, or is it staff who will determine how much grant the applicant, it's a matching grant, they will get approved? I know the city put $100 every year, if I'm not wrong, or 150, and many applicants apply for that. How does that work?
I'll try to answer your question as best I can. So typically, there's an allowance, and I mentioned what the allowance was, $10,000 per facade. They can ask for it, and it has to go before multiple committees. Of course, the UDC needs to approve the design, and then the finance committee will approve the dollar amount. Does that answer your question?
Yes, 10,000 is maximum then? They cannot apply more?
10%. Maximum of 10,000 per facade. So on a corner, it would be 20,000. And of course, they have to match it. It's a matching grant. They have to spend up to the same amount.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Welcome back, Tom. Do you hear yourself, Tom? I mean, can you hear what you sound like? No? Have you ever seen the movie The Fly? That's what you sound like. Yeah, I know.
Could you try turning off your microphone and using the built-in microphone?
Tom, I hate to do this, but I just muted you again.
Tom, feel free to email your comments again.
Okay, Rafiq, I'm sure we'll be able to understand you a lot better.
I just had a question. The sketch that we're looking at right now, that's the extent of the renovation or the alteration. It doesn't go all the way down to the side.
Phil?
No, yeah, it's just what you see in the drawing there. It goes about 8 feet down the Baldwin side.
Is that on purpose, intentional?
Yeah, it's just the part of the building that's been hit by a truck. That is, you can see in those photos, it's kind of a darker cement block. and then it goes right into the old brick. It's just trying to make it affordable. And it kind of is in keeping with the theme or how the architecture in Irish pubs work, which I think looks pretty cool.
So there'll be nothing at all done to the other portion?
There will be some stuff done. There are 2 doors, if you can maybe bring.
No, I mean in terms of like the brick and the
brick will be
white
clean.
paint or the.
It's effervescence, I think it's called. It's a quality of old bricks, and it needs to be cleaned with, I think, some acids and things like that. But I'd like to do that as well with the grant.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure that it's not just stopping there and nothing else happens to the rest of it, because that would be counterproductive.
Right.
I think you said some tuck pointing as well. Possibly.
It's already been tuck pointed last year.
That's right. Thank you.
Any comments on the tree canopy? No? Okay. Let's see. So the request is for approval of the design for the grant. Okay, Lois.
I'll make a motion for approval, but I would like a little, I mean, I know the sketch is pretty conceptual, but I'd like some attention to some of the details where it comes back and hits the building. And then I also wanted to suggest that it stop short of the corner that faces EVP. So it mimics how it ends on the other side on the flat, as it comes around on Baldwin.
Basically matching the I guess the westernmost window jamb of the second floor there.
Yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, right above there. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Jessica, is that a second? Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Let's see here.
Oh, there's a comment from Tom.
Oh.
My apologies.
Did you receive it in
Email?
Yes.
Comment from Tom. I like the pub example that had photos on the windows, maybe former recording stars of the studio, better than just gray paint. That's the suggestion. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
I like the idea of windows as well. I'm worried because of all the I get tagged almost every week here that the windows would be broken pretty quickly.
Okay.
All right. So the motion, the seconded motion is for approval with attention to details and more robust materials at the base and termination short of the corner. See any further discussion on the motion? Seeing no hands raised. You've got the approval with those conditions. Thank you very much.
Phil, I'll work with you after the meeting tonight.
Okay, thank you.
So let's see, where are we here? Number 5 brings us to item number 6, Crosswinds Lane, an amended SIP.
The team members include Patrick Petrello and Conrad Gorman, both wishing to speak. I'll have the file up in just a moment.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Petrello or Gorman, either one, you're welcome to start at any time you'd like.
Okay.
Conrad, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. So I'm Conrad Gorman, and we are looking for approval for 2 16-unit condominium buildings in the Hawks Landing neighborhood on the far west side. The site was approved for 5 buildings in 2000. 3 of them were built, and we're now looking to build the final 2 in the same footprints of the expired permits. I'm going to turn over to Patrick, the architect on the project, to share the details of the plan with you.
Thanks, Conrad. My name is Patrick Petrello. I'm the Director of Architecture for Gorman and Company. You can see in front of you the location there. If you want to zoom in on the aerial shot, if that's possible. Basically, sorry to complicate things. Basically, the two lots there left are the two buildings that were never completed, and that's what we're looking to complete. You can flip to the next slide. We're not proposing anything drastically different than what was already proposed, but the site plan does show the impervious area is equal to what it was previously approved. The one thing that we are requesting to add is a fenced-in dog area, about 20 by 30 feet in the lower left-hand corner of the plan there. Next slide. The biggest change was we did increase some square footage, but it didn't increase the area that where the building hits the ground. So the two end units were smaller before, and we've increased the great room space and the balcony that faces the golf course to the north. Again, it didn't have any effect on impervious area because on the first level, there's a parking garage per the previous design, and those spaces were just patio spaces on the first floor. So now they're larger units. Next slide. And this is the garage that is almost identical to the previous design. Next slide. The roof plan, we have 16 condensing units on the roof, hidden from sight behind the hip roof, but there's a flat area proposed to house those mechanicals. Next slide. This is a streetscape montage just showing you the three buildings that were built. As you can see, they were built over time, so they have a slightly different architectural style. Our intent is to continue that different style and do a hip roof all the way around. So the roof line would be slightly different, and then to change the brick color on the two buildings so that every building is slightly different. Next slide. Some of the materials that we're looking at, some of the subtle changes we're looking at to have some betterments to this design. Again, the hip roof is one. The two brick colors are subtly different. The cast stone is a similar product to what you would see on the Cafe Hollander. That's a picture there at the top. It's kind of small, sorry. And then we're looking at bronze colored windows instead of white vinyl, just to give it a little differentiation from the other buildings. And some cedar accents in between the windows and for the columns. Next slide. This is the major difference in the facade that faces the golf course. The balconies have been expanded, but again, the form is similar to what was previously approved. Next slide. Next slide. The two sides are very similar to what had been previously approved. Next slide. And the lighting, the label C lighting is a match to the poles that are out there existing. So we're just matching that and extending the drive per previous approval. The other two fixtures, B is over the garage doors that enter the parking structure area, and A is next to the pedestrian doors. With that, again, I think we're just trying to make some upgrades over the previous buildings, and we're just looking for your approval. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Russell?
Thank you for the presentation. Is it fair to say these two buildings you're proposing are the most alike of the total 5? I just looking at the existing 3, they have a, I would say, different character, each of them, but these two proposed are quite similar, other than the brick color. Is that intentional?
Yeah, I mean, the other 3 buildings were built in periods of time, so there was a break in between each one due to the condo market. I guess that is a accurate statement, although between colors, that it would be our intention to make them look differently and just have a similar form.
I'd encourage, yeah, I guess that was my reaction to seeing the design. And I mean, I would encourage to maybe explore some ways to try to give some character between the 2 new buildings, to try to kind of stay in step with the previous design direction, I suppose, would be my recommendation. Thank you.
Christian?
So these are condominiums, not apartments, correct?
Correct.
And this whole development is all condominiums, or are they all part of the same association?
Yeah, we're going to try to amend the association for these 2 buildings to join the existing condo association. There's 16 units in all of the 3 existing buildings, and then the proposed buildings also have 16 units per building.
But those 5 buildings total are not necessarily connected to the other buildings that are in this entire development that we saw on the big map?
The parking lots will be connected. The parking structures are independent, and the buildings are not physically connected. But the intentions, and we've talked to the condo association, is to have all 5 buildings as the same condo owners association.
And looking at the plans for the garages, basically one interior parking garage space for each unit?
2 per unit. There'll be 2 levels of parking and 2 stalls and a storage unit for each unit.
Okay, and the surface ones are more or less for visitors?
Yeah, for guests would be the main intention.
Okay. I'll just make one comment, even though you didn't go over it on any of the plans here. It was in the set that we got. Your landscaping looked, pretty nice. There was a nice variety of trees and shrubs and stuff around there. I was a little surprised to see, and this is my inner plant snob coming out, but I saw on the plant list that you had purple sand cherries specced in there, and that's really an unfortunate choice with all the other nice plants you have in there. I mean, you have other dark-leaved plants, Weigelias and smoke bush and stuff. That purple sand cherry, I mean, that's a landscape plant of like the 60s and 70s that's really fallen out of favor, and I would encourage you to lose those and bulk up the numbers of the other dark-leaved plants that you have in there.
Okay.
That's all I got.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have a question/comment from Tom?
Okay.
On the large blank parking plinth exterior, instead of just insetting the false windows, could they have some alternative and contrasting covering like shutters or louvers, etc.?
Yeah, I agree with that. And just looking at what photos we can of the other large buildings that are nearby, it seems like there's a little bit more care paid to, a little bit of the way the base was rusticated and detailed to emulate some openings, ins and outs, a little bit of detailing that is more in scale. Yeah, you can even see it behind the lush landscaping there, but instead of just a few little small recesses, it looks like there really could benefit from a little bit more attention to detail at that rusticated base. Lois.
Thank you. My comment is about the entry, the main entry on both facades seems kind of underwhelming. I think it almost looks like a service entry, the way it's kind of, it appears like you're going into the garage because of the material extending across all the way. You have the man door with the little vision light there, and it just doesn't feel very welcoming at all, and it doesn't feel like a main entrance to me. Is there any way we can, by maybe changing the material in front of that, adding more glass, to have it, be a little bit more like a queue for a main entrance than, just into, it looks like it might be going right into the parking garage the way it's on that plinth.
Sure. Yeah, all great comments. We can take a look at all these items.
Yeah, even the where you're showing the implied lintel at those blocked up openings. I mean, they don't have to be that low. I mean, really, that could be a lot more bolder statement to really give it some something substantial for this brick building to sit on.
Mm-hmm.
That's at a more human scale.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, Jessica. Hold on. There you go.
I'm trying to understand what was approved before and what is before us now. I wanted to piggyback on what Lois was saying about that entrance. I kind of find the scale and the use of those timber posts to be confusing against such heavy massing of stone and brick. And that the facade, and I think I question it on this facade, to be honest, the size of those posts that are holding up the canopy over that entrance in relation to that, pretty heavy plinth you've got behind it. And then also I just wanted to mention on the opposite side where you've got all of the balconies, again, I'm not sure what was approved before, so I don't even know if this is even appropriate to mention, but I also question the scale and the height of those wood posts. They seem pretty delicate compared to everything else. And that's not a make or break thing, but they stand out to me, and I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Okay. They are looking for final approval. We've certainly given a number of comments here with regard to some of the materials and the proportions of some of the elements. Rafiq.
Yeah, my question is similar to Jessica's. I'm not sure what was approved before, but when the applicant started speaking, he said that these were approved and then a time ran out or something like that. Is that what I heard?
Well, yeah, I guess the GDP is in place. The SIP was approved in 2000, and these two buildings were not built, so the SIP approval expired. So you can jump in Janine or Kevin, but it's my interpretation that these buildings are consistent with the GDP, and this is an SIP update.
So if this wasn't something that was approved before, this was the first time we were seeing these buildings?
Well, the Urban Design Commission saw these buildings, but they weren't built. So what they're doing is they're updating the exterior design. As you can see on what's on the screen there, those other three buildings are essentially the same scale and orientation and so forth, but with a bit different exterior expression. Maybe
Right,
the floor plans have changed too.
I understand that, but my question is, had that not been the case, and this was a project coming before us right now, nobody would comment on this very massive base that's blank and very bulky?
Certainly, preferences and times change. And after 20 years, at least in the 9 that I've been on the Urban Design Commission, those kind of large, massive, windowless elements are discouraged.
Right. So my question is, do we not do this to the 2021 standards? Is it kind of grandfathered in on what's there before? Because that's a blank wall that I think anybody would comment on any other project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you've heard a number of comments tonight.
Cliff, can I speak to your question?
Go ahead.
These are all good questions. So as Cliff mentioned, the original GDP and SIP was approved, several years ago, and the other developments were built. These two last. And so things to consider, of course, this is today, and we're looking at as today's PD standards. But we're also looking at how it fits within the context. So that's up to the commission to make that determination. But those are two things to consider. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just want to point out too a couple things. The buildings are a little bit lower than the drive, than the major thoroughfare there, which is one thing that kind of blocks that view. The pedestrian experience is pretty much right up to the building is limited to the folks that live in these buildings. That separate sidewalk. So just the way that it's laid out and was approved in the past. It does fit with the context of the other buildings in terms of that, but I understand your question. I just don't know how much it would achieve in this particular instance.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns? Lois.
Yeah, I guess I just want a clarification. In the elevations that you have shown, or the perspectives that you have shown on the screen, when I look at the site plan, there's a line of, there's another road and parking in front of that building, and then another neighborhood sidewalk, and then the sidewalk for the occupants of the building. So it's pretty far away from Midtown Road. It looks like there's a significant amount of landscaping in front of that foundation wall, and from the photographs of the existing buildings, it does really conceal what the renderings kind of highlight is that exaggerated foundation wall. So I think that it would recede a little bit, or it wouldn't be as evident once, from the road and from the pedestrian, experience of people that don't live there. So this, I guess, drawing or whatever, it looks like a photograph that you superimposed the elevations on. It's much further back from that, isn't it? From the road? Looks like there's another sidewalk and then parking and then the buildings.
Yeah, it is quite a ways. And when you're on site, I don't know if it's a bike path or a pedestrian walkway closer to Midtown does seem that it is a little bit higher grade than the parking lot. So it does conceal quite a bit of that.
Mm-hmm. And I think if it was pushed down, it would look odd next to the other buildings. It wouldn't have the same, if you kind of wanted to push that parking down into the ground a little bit to get rid of that big blank wall, I think that would look odd as well.
I don't know how much further down they're pushing it. Can't be that much further.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the natural grade goes down there, downhill a little bit too.
Yeah, it does slope down as you go west on that lot. Slightly, it's not a dramatic, but it definitely does grade down as you go that way towards the park.
Yeah, I noticed that all through. Are those duplex units in the rest of the development then?
Yeah, those have all been completed. I think they were completed around 2008 or so. It was the recession of 2008, 2009 is basically why these two buildings were not completed at that time.
Yeah, I noticed there's no sidewalks at Tailwind, Windy, Gusty, Breezy. So that's just a kind of a whole different kind of a development than we're used to seeing. But nonetheless, these are the last two pieces. Russell.
Just one quick addition to Lois's last comments. The existing site seems to have some fairly mature trees right between Midtown Road and the new proposed buildings, and the plan doesn't indicate the fate of those particular trees, and wondering if if those trees could be kept, and if that rendering that Janine just pulled up here is really accurate in terms of the maturity of the trees in front of those two buildings.
I don't remember what the trees look like offhand. I can go back on site during this week and kind of get an idea of what's there existing, and obviously we'd like to keep as much as we could.
Is from a 3D map online, it looks like there's the same maturity of vegetation as you see for the existing three buildings in the front. So, wondering if that eases some of the concerns from my colleagues here. Thank you.
Yeah, and certainly maybe the driveway and cul-de-sac could be reconfigured if need be to work around those. Let's see, Lois.
Well, I'm going to make a motion for approval with the request that the entryways are made a little bit more inviting, that there's a little bit more detail in the foundation wall, similar to the adjacent buildings, in that every effort to protect and keep any mature trees that may be now in front of those buildings be be respected, and they try to do that to the greatest ability.
Okay, and that's final approval?
And that's for final.
Okay. Is there a second? Rafiq, oh, I'm sorry, Alder Abbas, that's a second? Oh, wait a minute. Did you have your hand raised, Alder Abbas?
No, I just said second.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Okay.
Does that include the landscaping comments from Chris?
There was a species, right?
The purple sand cherries.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, to get rid of those. Sorry about that. I forgot the.
Okay. So that's a friendly amendment to the motion to include the comments on the plant species. Okay. Seeing no other hands raised. I see a hand raised. Hold on, Rafiq. Oh, just let me unmute. There you go.
It's not unanimous.
I'm sorry. Did you have your hand raised?
I raised my hand so that you know that it's not unanimous.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. So then it is not unanimous. Therefore, I just ask Janine if you could please just ask for a roll call vote.
Okay. Commissioner Brown-Otto?
Yes.
Commissioner Knudsen?
No.
Commissioner Claire?
No.
Commissioner Deschamps? So yes. Alder Abbas?
Aye.
Commissioner Harper?
Yes.
Commissioner Bruneau?
Yes.
Commissioner Assad was
No.
okay. In favor of yes.
Yes, I counted 5 in favor of yes, so the motion carries. You have final approval, but you'll need to work with staff to incorporate the comments as part of the motion for approval. Thank you very much. All right, let's see, item number 7. 1858 through 1890 East Washington Avenue.
The team members for this item that wish to speak include Adam Fredenthal and Steve Dorian. I'll have the file up in just a moment. Okay.
I'm not sure if it was because I was late, if Janine made it known.
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding us. We know that you're recusing yourself on that one.
Janine, I'm not sure if it's both, but Steve was going to start the discussion here.
Yep. Can everybody hear me okay?
We sure can.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for taking the time to hear us on our proposal tonight. We're very excited about presenting this, and this is for informational review only tonight. This is the corner of First Street and East Washington Avenue where the Washington Plaza Shopping Center sits. Also home to Dollar Tree, Sherwin-Williams, and various other smaller tenants. We've been working on various iterations of this project for nearly 5 years now and feel like we have a plan that is dialed in and makes sense. I'm going to let Adam run through the images and the site plan, but before he does that, just a quick overview. We're proposing a mixed-use apartment commercial project that would have approximately 344 apartments with about 15,000 square feet of commercial space on the first floor. Our goal is to ensure the first floor users include restaurants and retailers that really embrace the and support the neighborhood and the new public market that is going to be built to the north. The project does allow for a future connection into the public market on the northwest corner property, but timing that connection is really at the discretion of kind of the public market or City of Madison. There are some police storage buildings that I think will still be in existence there for a couple of years, even after the public market is going to be built. We're a long-term holder. Our goal is to build and retain ownership of this long-term. We've put a tremendous amount of thought into the design to ensure the project's sustainable, respectful to the neighbors, primarily to the east, and also very environmentally conscious. The property is located right in front of a proposed BRT bus route station. And so we intend to promote the use of carbon-free transportation as much as possible, as well as encourage the use of public transit. We'll have numerous car charging stations on site with the ability to expand over time. And Adam can kind of get into the details a little bit more of this, but the project right now is proposed as 7 stories, although it does step back after 5 stories along First Street and East Wash, with the exception that we do have some townhomes proposed along First Street that are 2 stories with the intention to really scale the project down appropriately to the neighborhoods to the east. So with that, Adam, I'll kind of let you walk through the site plan and position, as well as the concept elevations we've put together to this point.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Janine, if you could jump to the next slide quick. As you mentioned, we're approximately 344 units. Currently, we are parked with 375 spaces, which is a metric of 0.9 per unit and 5 stalls per 1,000 square feet of anticipated commercial. Building is approximately 70% studio and 1 bedroom and 30% 2 bedroom. There's ongoing evaluation of some larger 3-bedroom units as well. Next slide, please. As a quick view, the lowest level, which is underground but at grade on the north corner there, is all residential parking with access from the north, where the site naturally is at a low point. Next slide, please. At this first floor, so as we move up First Street towards East Wash, those would be where those townhomes walk-up units are, and the building projects out at an angle there, which you'll see in the perspective views momentarily. The primary commercial entrance from First Street is a right in, right out behind the commercial, which was where the access to their parking will be. And the goal is to have as grade comes up to meet East Washington, to have the ground floor level as close to that elevation at the corner of First and East Wash as possible. Next slide, please. As we move up the building, actually, could you back up one, please, Janine? I'm sorry. I forgot to mention that along the west side of the site is where the connector fire access road and access to surface parking is along the railroad tracks there. And then the primary residential entrance is from that side as well. Okay, now the next one. Real quickly through these plans, the second floor is where there'll be some residential amenity space and green roofs. There's 2 green roofs proposed in between the building arms. And then this shown on the screen here is the stacking 3rd floor and 5th levels. Next slide. As Steve mentioned, we step back after the 5th floor, 15 feet along First and East Wash. And then on the next slide, we have the 7th floor, where we're evaluating some rooftop amenity spaces for both residential and potentially a rooftop connection for a bar restaurant area along the end of the East Wash arm, if you will. Next slide. So these next series of slides, we have what was submitted and where we are currently in design. So I'm just going to jump past the first one for each one. This is what was submitted. Next slide. And on this one, you'll see an update in materials. So some of the progress we've made is changing the base of material to a stone, where the commercial tenants will be, as well as capturing the entrances to the parking. And you can see to the right there along the base, those would be the townhouse walk-up units. So right in this corner is where that I mentioned would be up as close to grade as possible. And then it slopes down along East Wash, where we're going to provide some terraced landscaping to bring up to a pedestrian level adjacent to the building. Next slide. Primary materials that we're looking for here is, we want to keep the palette really simple. So we have a main field of brick, which is a primary wall, and then a black or dark gray metal panel to break that up at strategic locations on the facade. And some of those deeper shadows are where balconies happen. And then this is, of course, next slide, please. That's a variation of a complementary color for the brick on the townhomes helps set that off a bit. It's kind of the intent there. We're still developing design. This is real preliminary, of course. Next slide. Here's a view closer to the corner of First and East Wash on the right, looking towards the Capitol on the left. Next slide. You can see the difference between the base material that will really help set that apart and differentiate the commercial from the residential. Next slide. This is submitted. Next slide. Proposed. You can see the three arms off to the left there and the green roofs that would happen in between. And then in the foreground is the access point. It ramps back up as we move around the building. This was to get grades to work with entrances. And it does mean that we're building up the grade on the west and north side of the site. So there's a retaining wall that follows that around. Next slide, please. Jump past this one to the next one again. Just a view, it gives you a sense of the mass and form of the building. Next slide. From the other side, one more slide, please. So that's from the other direction. You can see in the foreground there's a line of evergreen trees, and that white there is that retaining wall. As it steps up, it would go from a fairly low height, a couple feet at the beginning on the right, and up to about 8 feet on the back side. Next slide. This is a view from First Street looking towards East Wash. Next slide. Kind of see the difference in materials here. As proposed, mentioned before. And next slide.
I think that's the last one.
That's the last one, yeah. So that said, I spoke rather quickly. I was trying to get in under the 3 minutes, but thank you.
Thank you.
This is Steve again. Just real quick, one other thing I did want to mention. We did have a neighborhood meeting last Thursday with the local alders, Alder Abbas. This is Alder Abbas's district. And overall, I'm sure Alder Abbas can speak to this as well, but overall, the neighborhood meeting did go very, very well. I think there's a lot of support for the project. There are concerns which we are addressing. And I would say among chief concerns is the neighborhood is very worried about parking from our project spilling into the neighborhood. And there is a desire from a few of the residents for us to look at and maybe increase the available parking from the 0.9 stalls per unit, slightly above that, to ensure that there are no parking issues into the neighborhood. So we are evaluating that right now. Overall, I think most of the other comments were pretty minor in nature. There were several comments about trying to get another crosswalk over the railroad or get a sidewalk pedestrian path that's a little more friendly over into the Atwood neighborhood. Things like that. Of course, we support wholly, but really are not under our control. So I just wanted to mention that we did have our first neighborhood meeting.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments? Start with Alder Abbas and then Jessica.
Thank you very much. As Steve, there was a neighborhood meeting. I'm going to share some of the notes I made and some of the email I got from resident. There was concerns with the parking, especially for the commercial side. The commercial, if we move this slide into commercial parking stalls, so also with residential parking. Yep. So behind this building, parking. So there's a concern with parking. There was also concern with pedestrian and bicyclist safety and how this design can help. We need a broader discussion on East Washington. Beside this own project, this is something city, and I am looking forward to work with engineers, but I want to also mention to the commission, while they're looking into design, they can also think about pedestrian and bicyclist safety. Another comment was about if we can go in a town hall, the townhomes in the front. So there was a couple of comments about, right here. And aesthetically how this look and might be, we have, some people think we have to redesign these and make this project much more engaged. Another comment, thank you. Just keep one more slide back. Right here. There was also quite a bit of discussion about resident get-together place or kids to play in the area. The developer is proposing between those big blocks, they're proposing to have green space or green roof. They're still deciding, and might be Steve can speak more to that, but there was an idea about creating some space, green space there for resident and community members to still be in the building and enjoy the greenery around it. And then another couple of comments I received was about this particular location, which is very visible from east side, west side, south side, and then on the north we have a public markets right on the corner. So the community really want to see urban design suggestion how this architectural design of the building could be much more engaging, and that's something, some of the feedback I also get from community. So just want to share feedback with all of you. Thanks.
Thank you. Jessica.
Yeah. I had three things I just wanted to mention. I would agree that I'm not quite sure I understand how the townhomes fit into that facade. I think I heard mention that they were included to try and to break down the facade scale-wise to speak to the neighborhood to the east. And I think that probably warrants some review. The scale of maybe it's because they're white or maybe it's just this image, but those white railings going up to those entrances look out of scale and out of place compared to the building behind it. So I guess I'm not understanding that well. I looked at you talked about the population that might live here. And if this is going right next to the city market, I don't know if it's my place to put this, but I sure wish there were larger units so families could be there. So it looked like a lot of studios and a lot of one bedrooms, some two bedrooms. But I think Madison is considering this to be a hot new spot of town and it could be really active. You mentioned that you were thinking of 3-bedroom apartments, and I would like to say yay, because that might enable families to live here. The last thing I wondered was you broke this up into like an E shape and mentioned that there are green spaces in between. Just with the way the building's oriented, I'm curious with the height of the building and the depth of those spaces, if they're ever going to get any sun. Not ever, but if they're going to get much sun, and what those are big spaces if you're filling them up. I'm curious what those would be like.
Okay. Thank you. Christian.
Yeah, I just want to jump in quick. Jessica brought up exactly what I was going to say. I'm really glad you're thinking green roofs, and I realize that term can encompass a lot of different strategies. But as far as what most people picture, green roofs with living plants, whether they be sedum tiles or whatever. This orientation of these spaces where these would go, I think is pretty much east-west. So yeah, at the summer solstice, they'd get a lot of sun when the sun was directly overhead, but that's going to be a couple months of the year. And while if this was a 3-story building, that might work for plant material down in there. The fact that it's a 7-story building is very problematic, I would say, for that aspect. So I think just that whole concept of what's going to go in there, what it is as far as a green roof and what its availability is to the tenants, access and such is something that really needs to be looked at.
Okay, thank you. I would like to make sure that the commission refers to the staff report. There are some, Janine pointed out, there are some setback concerns that need to be considered. And certainly we don't have the authority to permit setback infractions, but just to summarize it, I guess on the image that we're looking at, apparently there may be a little bit more setback than what UDD number 8 requires, and then the parking ramp may be infringing on the setback, where it kind of pushes up out of the ground for parking on the East Washington side. Janine?
I can speak to that quickly. Yep. I'm muted. Okay.
Yep.
I'll read a very quick excerpt. So there is some language in UDD 8 that allows the commission to make an interpretation. So I'll read this very quickly. Okay, so along First Street, the plans appear to show a 15-foot setback where a 5 to 10-foot setback range is required. While staff understands the rationale of having additional setback for the street-facing residential units, it's also inconsistent with the current district requirements. However, the code states that the UDC may allow greater setbacks to allow for articulation of a long building facade for the development of additional usable public open space, such as pedestrian plazas, as long as design elements are included to maintain uniform character in the district. So given the traffic volumes under North First Street and the proposed mass of the building, and if you look down the street at the what will be the new market, the setbacks there, those are things that the commission consider if there's adequate landscaping and activation along that facade. Thank you.
Janine, is there any discussion or further clarification on the East Washington side?
The East Washington side, the team has revised the underground parking so that it is within the setback, so that is no longer an issue.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Lois, and then Shane.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a couple of things that I'll probably echo some of the other commissioners' comments about the townhouse in particular. I think it looks very industrial. There's not a really clear connection. It doesn't look like there are any windows that are on the floor level that would have a view out, which I'm not sure is necessarily a bad thing, but it doesn't look very inviting. All of the, it could have something to do with the vertical railings that look kind of institutional. It looks very cold. I think that needs a little bit of work. And then carrying around to East Wash, I think you'll have to, I'd like to see some creative design other than just a slab with a railing around it, which I think may not be as attractive in the winter. I would assume that in the warmer months it has some activation and maybe some outside furniture, but I think there's maybe bring another planting level up instead of railings. Maybe there's a little bit more of a continuation of a wall with an opportunity for some plantings. That just looks really institutional and repetitive and not very warm. I'm also concerned with the deep, the roof areas that you have between the fingers of the building and what those will look like. It feels like you really do need to provide some exterior space for your tenants, and that is a great place to have some, but it's going to be very dark. That's a concern of mine. And then I'm also wondering if there's a pedestrian connection to the park, because that's an obvious place for folks to want to maybe head over to, and it doesn't appear that there's a way through the retaining wall, and maybe there's an opening that's opposite the front entry doors, just to give it a little bit more of a pedestrian friendliness, because it seems like the pedestrians have to kind of circumvent a lot of parking.
I think, isn't there a railroad there though, Lois? I'm not sure they're going to be able to, well, I mean, kids like me would hop the fence and cross the tracks.
Oh, that's true. I think that you're right. They have to go. You're right. Sorry about that. I was just seeing this retaining wall.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Shane?
Sure, I'll pick up right where we left off. I can tell you from firsthand experience, a lot of people currently park in that surface parking lot to use the Burr Jones Park, and there's no fence at that piece of the railroad, so they just cut across it.
I think they put a fence in there.
Oh, did they put a fence?
Yeah,
in? Okay.
when they redid the parking lot for the park.
Okay. So I guess I'm definitely not advocating for more surface parking, but I think as a management strategy, I just know that could continue. And then just echoing some of the other comments I've heard, as long as we're on this side, I think I really like the porch or the plinth on this frontage. And I agree with some of Lois's comments, like another layer of plantings at the top behind the railing would be beneficial and nicer. But overall, I think this side is much more successful in the way it feels architectural. Especially if there's plants layered into it, it has kind of this hanging gardens quality. I would want to definitely make sure that equity and accessibility are thought of, so that it's not just stairs connecting people from point to point. But overall, I kind of like how it meets the streetscape. And I think because it's early and the renderings are rough at this point, that I know the driveway apron and the sidewalk and everything does continue and flows over to the park, more so than just like the asphalt paving interrupting and sweeping in from the street. Now on the other side, I think I agree with everyone's assessment that the amount of blank wall and that scale, that space is just not nearly as successful. I don't have any issue with the extra setback from the street. I think, it kind of forming a line and not necessarily following or paralleling the multiple angles of the street is fine with me. And I think that to go a little bit beyond that setback, a deeper setback is okay. But right now it's just not used in a great way. It's the elevation and the height of those porches is too great. And like Lois and others have said with the windows and blank walls, it's just not working. The other thing I would kind of coming back to the topic of the courtyards and just the general massing of the building itself. If I want to live here, I definitely want to look out over the park and towards downtown. I think that's definitely the preferable frontage as a tenant. It's maybe kind of interesting that that side does have the surface parking lot and the less continuous facade. So I know the greater surface area as you dip into the courtyard, it maybe exposes more people to the park, and I get that. But I think just keep in mind that that's probably the more desirable side, and that park and the view towards downtown is a real amenity to you. I think that's it for now.
Great, thank you. Well, while we're waiting for more hands, I would just add a few things. First of all, with the view that we have, I would really advocate taking any ramping that goes from the development down to East Washington and move it as far east as possible and avoid a switchback ramp. I just think that really makes it look less accessible than more accessible. And I think if you can go a little bit further east, you may decrease the amount of ramping you need and that switchback. Also, I really would recommend you working on the design on that middle bar to somehow really have an entrance to the apartment building statement. I know that that's where the entrance is, and the early renderings don't distinguish it, I think, enough from commercial development, from the street view. I think as it deserves, back there, and it may be that whole middle bar elevation, does something to say, here's where the entrance is for pedestrians and visitors and so forth. And then finally, I would echo what others said about the townhouses. I think that maybe they could be articulated more in a series versus a strong horizontal bar, a vertical set of series, and to make those porches really usable. You've got the extra setback. Maybe you can actually do something where people can sit out on them, and maybe a little low wall could lower the amount of railing that you need to express there. But overall, I think it's really the use of materials, the colors, the openings, the large openings, and the proportion of the building, has a really good start. It doesn't fall back on any revival styles or anything. I think it shows real nice self-confidence and good scale, particularly with what's going on the other side of East Washington. I'm sorry, East Washington over there, the Marling lumber side. I think this would be a nice complement to that. So, any other questions? They're here as an informational, and they've given us a lot of information, and they've been kind enough, and Alder Abbas has been kind enough to let us know what the neighborhood's thinking as well. But now's the time to really give them peace of our mind before we send them on their way. Okay, I do see Alder Abbas's hand raised.
Yeah, Chair, I'm not sure what rules or regulation are, but I saw Steve's hand was raised and I was curious to hear from him if that's okay.
Yes, I was just going to say, if the commission didn't have anything else, then I would open it up for the applicant to make some closing comments. Mm-hmm. So I will see if I can find Steve and Adam and unmute
Steve, you should be unmuted.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for all the comments, all really good comments that we will take to heart and make adaptations before we submit final. I just want to real quickly, I took some notes here, and I would like to maybe answer a few questions that a few of the members had, just to give a little bit of clarity. And Alder Abbas, I guess I'll start with Alder Abbas. You are correct. The courtyard areas between the buildings facing the park, that is intended to be all green roof amenity area for the residents. And we're in the process right now programming that space, but it's going to include a myriad of different things. We recognize a lot of residents here. We need to provide areas for them to be outside, areas for pets, areas for activities, and we're in the process right now of programming all of those things, which I believe will, based on our experience with other projects, we'll continue to program throughout the project's life now and through construction and even after it's open. The middle appendage, as you probably saw from the floor plan, on the middle appendage on the second floor, that is all interior amenity space. So it's set up so that residents will be able to traverse from one courtyard to the next. Between, it looks like Janine's maybe bringing that up, but residents will be able to traverse between the two courtyards without having to go into a unit. So in that middle bar on that second floor, if you want to go back, Janine, on that middle bar, that wall on the second floor will all be an interior amenity space, if that makes sense. And then I guess to Jessica Clare's comments, I do agree we need to work on the townhomes. They need help. The fences are they're not white. I think that's just kind of a placeholder for what we're trying to do. I'd like to be able to bring those maybe a little bit more of that stair area into the building so that like Cliff had mentioned, we maybe can have a nice patio along First Street that's usable and have a nice public plaza area there too. So I appreciate the comments and being able to stick with a 15-foot setback there, because I think that's going to help us do some creative things there with that facade. We are evaluating larger units for families. We've heard that comment from a few people, and that is something we are definitely evaluating. And then we will look closer at the sun and the areas in the courtyards. I do understand the concern for the sun. It's a big concern for us too. The building naturally does want to face that way because the views towards the park and the Capitol are the best facing that way. And I think it's just going to be our job to make sure we do a good job of programming those courtyards with the right types of plants and things that are appropriate for the amount of sun that we get there. Let's see. I believe Lois Brown had a few comments on the industrial look of the building. I think I agree. We need this side of the building. We are kind of going for a timeless industrial kind of look, but we'll certainly look at that and try to make sure that we soften it up and make it a little friendlier looking. Lois, one comment: there is no pedestrian connection to the park from the building. There's the railroad there prevents us from doing that. There is a pedestrian connection along East Washington Avenue that our residents will be able to take advantage of, but and that's kind of right at the, I guess, southwest corner of our site. Residents will be able to travel on the sidewalk that's right on East Wash to Burr Jones Park. But unfortunately, the railroad is not going to allow us create a pedestrian connection anywhere else on our site. We'd love it, but that's something that's really out of our control. I think we covered your comments. You had mentioned maybe creating some more plantings above the commercial. I think that's a great idea. We'll look at that. Shane kind of echoed those comments, and I think that's a great idea. And I think you're right, Shane. Our goal, if we do try to incorporate some more parking to get the neighborhood comfortable and get ourselves comfortable, frankly, that we have adequate parking, it will be underneath. We don't have any desire to add any more surface parking in the project. So I think that's it. I think, and then, Cliff, you had mentioned I like your idea of maybe making the townhomes look like they're a series of vertical townhomes and maybe a little distinct to each other to try to really make them appear like townhomes and not a blank wall. So we'll look hard at that and come up with a better option for that townhome side. I think that's it.
Yeah, and again, I think the switchback ramp is a real detraction for front elevation of the building.
Yep, sorry, I missed that. I think we originally had placed it there thinking that, it would solve the need for 2 handicap ramps because of the distancing, but I think we certainly could look at placing 1 ramp on the west side of the property and then probably not even needing one on the east side of the property because we're at grade there at the corner of First and East Wash. And so we'll look hard at what that could look like and see if that's a better fit.
Well, I appreciate you paying attention to the comments of the commission, and we look forward to seeing you again here when your schedule, I guess, has you back, in May, something like that?
Yeah, I think our goal is we were hoping to submit by March 31st for the May UDC. I don't quite think we're going to make March 31st. There's just a lot of work to do yet, but I think by our goal is to no later than mid-April be submitted and be back at UDC. I think that maybe puts us at the end of May, meeting, if I'm correct. I don't have the dates in front of me, but yeah, our goal is to hopefully be approved then and then go into Plan Commission. If the timing works out well on this, we're really trying to be under construction by this fall so that we can build through the winter and open in spring of 2023 when the public market does, so that we don't have construction lagging on either side. I think if we can follow that schedule, we'll open around the same time as the public market and everything will be done all at once, and we won't have one of us doing construction on top of each other.
We'll be here. Janine, I see you have your hand raised. Do you have anything on this item you wanted to add?
Yes, a quick comment from Tom. He would strongly hope that windows will be metal frame and not vinyl, as that would change the character of the building's sustainability, or substantially, excuse me. Anything else, Tom?
I can assure you we won't have vinyl windows.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I see no other comments on this one. Tom, I'm sorry we weren't able to hear you. What we did hear was incomprehensible, but I'm sure you'll get that worked out before our next meeting. Speaking of our next meeting, don't forget now, I think it's 3 weeks until our next meeting, not 2 weeks.
March 31st.
March 31st. Is there any other business by members? No.
Quick, just a heads up.
Right. Is this going to be the secretary's report right here?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Next meeting, we're hoping to provide a little bit more information on the 2021 virtual bus tour. So if you have any ideas, send those along. And then before the meeting, we'll send you a little bit more detailed list on what we heard from you and projects that we know are under construction or done. And then secondly, working with John Strange to get you some feedback on the question about the authority the UDC has with sustainability. That's it.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Janine, Kevin, Julie, thanks for all your work, your hard work. And Stefan, I think he's still there somewhere.
Still here.
Your support. And we'll see you in 3 weeks. 7:08 by unanimous consent. We are adjourned. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.